Hi there, I'm Nancy Nash with Starfish Strength, and today I want to share a recipe with you for one of my favorite chocolate things. Let's face it, we all crave sweets from time to time. But do I have to entirely blow my healthy eating plan just to indulge a little bit? I don't think so. Today, I want to share a recipe with you for a 3-ingredient vegan chocolate fudge. So this recipe was actually inspired by Alton Brown's Moulis chocolate pie, which is absolutely delicious. And if you're curious about that, I will leave a link in the description for you to check out later. So our 3 ingredients today are chocolate, firm tofu, and vanilla extract. Today I'm going to use 10 ounces of the endangered species oat milk premium chocolate chips so that this can be entirely vegan. If you're not vegan, feel free to substitute your favorite chocolate. I really like the Hershey's Zero Sugar chocolate chips. They're super chocolatey, which I love, and they don't have added sugar. So I'm going to start by melting my chocolate. I'm going to use a 4-quart pot. And then I want to fill it with enough water so it comes up about 1 inch to 1.5 inches. So for this particular pan, that's going to be about 6 cups of water. And then I'm going to turn the burner on high until it comes to a boil. If you're impatient like me, feel free to cover the pot because it does go a little bit faster. While our water is coming to a boil, I'm going to chop up my tofu. So I'm using about 16 ounces of firm tofu. Alton's original recipe actually calls for soft tofu, and I found out that it comes out more fudge-like when you use the firm tofu. So feel free to experiment and see what you like. So before I chop up my tofu, I want to drain all the water out of it. So I'm just cutting the tofu into approximately 1/2-inch cubes to make it easier to blend, but they don't have to be perfect since this is all getting blended together. And then I just put my tofu in a bowl because that will make it a little bit easier to dump in the blender than dumping it from my cutting board. Now comes the fun part. We're going to dump all the chocolate chips into the bowl. Now if you do find a misshapen one, you're supposed to eat that. So next, I want to add 1 teaspoon of vanilla to my chocolate chips, and I definitely do recommend using real vanilla and not imitation. And once I've added the vanilla, I'm just going to stir it gently to combine, and our water's come to a boil. So I'm going to turn it down to medium-high just so it's not a roaring boil, and we're going to put the bowl on top of our pot and gently stir the chocolate to melt it. This is definitely fun to do with kids, but make sure that you're supervising just so nobody gets burned. I'm going to make sure I use a pot holder so that my hand doesn't get burned melting the chocolate. This part does go kind of quickly, so depending on how hot your stove gets, you might find that you need to turn it down just a little bit more. All right, so as this begins to melt together, you're going to want to just scrape the edges of your bowl. Man, there is something about melted chocolate that is so fun. I am not an expert candy maker, but I love looking at the smooth chocolate. It's just super fun. And if you need to do a practice round where you melt some chocolate chips and dip some strawberries in it, I don't think anybody's going to complain. All right, so as that's coming together and you're seeing the last couple chocolate chips melt, I'm going to say just turn off the heat, and I'm actually going to leave this here while I start prepping my tofu in the blender. So the other thing you're going to want to have ready is an 8x8 pan. You could spray it with nonstick spray. You could go without the spray if you're okay with some chocolate sticking to the edges. I actually lined mine with nonstick parchment paper because that makes it really easy to pop out later. All right, so now I'm just going to add my tofu into the blender. And you can decide if you want to use a spoon if you're not doing this for your family. So I added about half my tofu, and then I'm gonna start blending. And then you could either use a spoon or you could just kind of shake this up a little bit because we do want to try to get it as fine as we can before we add our chocolate in. And I have not used a food processor for this, but I bet that would work great. I'm gonna be honest, I just kind of hate cleaning the food processor. So you can see this is coming together a little bit more. I know it doesn't look really that picturesque right now. So all I'm trying to do with this is really just take off all the sharp edges of the tofu. Not they're sharp, but you know, so you can really see it looks a lot creamier now. So it just took me about 4 rounds of blending it a little bit on the lowest setting, shaking it, and then coming back into it. And now we're gonna start adding the chocolate. So since we've kept this over on our pot, it stayed nice and warm. So I'm gonna add 1/3 to half of it, blend it, and then come back and add the rest. And then while I'm blending that, I am putting it back on the hot water just so that it stays nice and smooth and we don't wind up having it solidify and not blend well. So I'm gonna use a second spatula to just stir this a little bit in between. And you can see it's really coming together. All right, and then I'm gonna add the last of our chocolate here. You'll have to fight over who gets to lick the bowl. All right, so before I blend this again, I'm just gonna stir it and make sure that I really have all the tofu scraped up from around the edges. So at this point, I am gonna turn up the blender a little bit. I'm gonna turn mine to medium. Mine has about 5 settings. You can see it's already starting to look kind of moussey. Okay, so now I'm just gonna ladle this into our 8x8 pan, and I'm gonna do my best to spread it out into one even layer. I just wanna fully admit that I am a messy cook, and it is really hard for me not to get it on my fingers and the countertop. So if you're making a mess, no judgment. Chocolate mess is good mess, right? All right, so now this is ready to go in the fridge. But you do have an option here if you want to top it with anything. You could melt some mint chips. You could do a little cinnamon and cayenne on top if you like Mexican chocolate. It's totally up to you. So I'm just drizzling some chocolate that I had melted by itself on top here. Most people I know aren't going to complain that this has a little more chocolate. So I'm going to stick this in the fridge for about 2 hours. If you can wait that long, it will cut a little bit easier. So 2 hours later, this is what you're left with. I cut mine into 16 pieces, and with the ingredients that I used, they worked out to be about 120 calories. Can most fudges say that? And I think these are pretty generous sized pieces. So the texture is a little fluffier than fudge, but it really has an intense chocolate flavor, which I love. And it's also not super sweet, which I love. If you're someone that really likes super sweet chocolate things, you may want to go with Alton's original recipe and add some honey to this. You could add some monk fruit sugar. I've tried that in the past. So I'd love to hear how you like this in the comments below. And if you decide to make any additions of your own, how those turn out for you. Happy Valentine's Day. Thanks so much for joining me for this demonstration today. I hope you really enjoy this recipe and it helps you stay on track towards your nutrition goals and brings you one step closer to seizing your inner star. If you do need any other help with your nutrition plan, please feel free to check out my other videos or reach out to me personally in the link in the description. I look forward to continuing this journey with you, and I will see you in the next video. How many times do they have to wipe off their hands on Food Network shows?